right, well, welcome to Speak Hope Now. And we have a wonderful podcast here during Women's History Month. We have Jeni Evans with us. She's my wife. She has accomplished and achieved many great things in her life. She won't admit it, but that's the reason I have her on this podcast, so that she'll open up and she'll admit to those wonderful accomplishments, those great accomplishments. If you don't know this bit of information about Jeni, Jeni had a job, and we'll talk about this through the podcast. She had a job in which she did some radio and TV work, and she was the voice behind the commercials down in York, Pennsylvania, in that area. So she's done some wonderful things, and we're going to break those things down here today. I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of start off in your childhood, your teenage years. You were an incredible athlete. You were a cheerleader.
Yes.
Yeah, and you were highly involved in drama, theater.
My older brother and I attended Queen Anne School in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. So my parents were very pro-education and had wanted us to go to a school that would prepare us for college. They had dreams of us all three. I had two brothers, an older brother, younger brother, and they very much wanted us all to go to college. So it was a prep school in the area. My father was a lawyer, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and they just believed in education. And so that was their dream for us, was to go to a prep school. So in that, I got involved in the cheerleading program there. It was pretty intense. It wasn't your typical run-of-the-mill program. We trained all summer. We went to camp, and then after camp, we trained all summer. We lifted weights. We went to the gym. It was not your typical, just cheer on the sidelines. We competed in a program every year. We went to Orlando, Florida every year and competed together on a team. And I was never the little itty bitty one on top. I was always on the bottom because I was pretty strong. So, but that led into probably, I think it was my sophomore year, I discovered that I just wasn't the college prep material when it came to academics. And so I went to my parents and I said, I don't really feel like I fit academically here at the school. And so we sat and talked about it. And I said, I really would like to go to the public school. And in their minds, that was kind of like, why would you want to do that? But through talking and them hearing my heart as to why I wanted to do that. So they agreed. And in 10th grade, I switched over to the public school system. And that was a really great thing for me. I was able to take classes that were harder in my gifted areas. And then I was able to take some other classes where I really struggled in a easier realm. And got involved in cheerleading there. And did a couple of different programs, but actually my junior year in high school, met a girl in my English class who said, hey, you should come to my youth group. And I said, okay, sure, whatever that's about. And so went to youth group with her a couple times and said, hey, I really like this. Asked my mom and dad, I said, hey, could we go to church there? So we started going to church there, and that's how I got involved in theater. They had a theater program there at their church, which was like, I'd never heard of such a thing. I was like, who does theater in their church? Yeah. So they had a theater group, and I got involved in that. And they also had, which this is kind of going to date myself a little bit, but they had a pantomime group. And got involved in that. And I had dropped out of cheerleading because this theater program was really taking up my time, and got involved in pantomime and actually started competing in that. They had a fine arts program, which is, long story short, to make it as short as possible, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but competed in a group program and an individual program, and actually ended up winning at a national level and earned myself a scholarship to college. So which was, I guess, kind of unheard of in that day.
Yeah.
So,
well, for the college that you went to, it was unheard of, because those Christian colleges, and specifically it was an Assembly of God Christian college that you went to in Florida, Southeastern.
right.
They didn't have a lot of money to dole out scholarships, yet
Right.
you got a scholarship.
Well, and which is pretty amazing because my family came to know the Lord much later in life. My parents came to know the Lord later in life. And, the expectation was to follow in my father's footsteps, which he went to Maryland University, and then he went on to Georgetown. And the idea was to go to, the public universities. And so I was the first one in the family, and I said, I want to go to Bible college. And it was like, what? You want to go where?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I followed what I felt like God was calling me to do. And I went to Bible college, which was really kind of taboo in my family. Nobody in my family did that. Everybody, like going back generations, went to, public universities and got, professional careers.
Right. And it wasn't that you were lowering your educational standard because you couldn't meet the educational standard. I think you told me that you scored pretty high in math.
So yeah, I had always had a gift in math, and I went up through AP Calculus in high school, got a 4 on the AP exam. In fact, my teacher pulled me aside and said, you really need to apply for a math scholarship to some of the local universities. You'll get a great scholarship. You'll probably get money tossed your way to, maybe go into engineering or, which my father, was really, pushing me to, pursue something in math. My brother was in the engineering program. He was pursuing a life in the Navy at that time. And I just, I knew I had gone on a missions trip, and I knew that God had called me to the ministry somehow. He had called me to work with youth and young children and young adults. I just couldn't get past that. Even though I knew I had this gift, I just, it's one of those things that you just know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you went to Southeastern on this partial scholarship for
fine arts.
Fine arts, and specifically in theater production.
Right.
And you chose a degree in communication at Southeastern University.
I did.
Now, the interesting thing is that you went to school, and maybe you can add to the list, but you went to school. I met you there at school. So, again, I believe that it was God ordained that we were able to meet. Of course it was.
Of course.
We also went to school with some pretty popular people, or some people who went on to have some really interesting careers. One of them being Tommy Cologne. You did some ministry with him.
We did.
Tommy Cologne, his hip hop name is Urban Disciple, or Urban D. He's now in Tampa, Florida. And he has a large church there, an urban church there, in which he's been able to discover a lot of. I'm using this term loosely. They don't call themselves famous, but famous Christian hip hop artists. One being KB, and there's a lot more that follow KB that Tommy Cologne had a part in. Matt Reaver was another one that we went to school with. Matt Reaver is the son of Dave Reaver. Right. Who was injured in Vietnam really badly, mauled because of a phosphorus grenade. And Dave Reaver has gone on to do a wonderful ministry. But Matt played his father in the Dave Reaver story, a movie that's out on the market. We went to school with Dave Reaver, Matt Reaver, Dave Reaver's son. And we also went to school with a guy named Ronnie Freeman. I think we were talking about him just recently. Ronnie Freeman was an incredible singer and musician at our school, who went on to be mentored by Michael W. Smith.
Right.
And then from there, Ronnie Freeman has produced a lot of music, and he's very active in the music ministry. And so we've been with him. Maybe you can add to the list. We've seen a lot of people in our generation at college back in the early to mid 90s rise to this level and pretty exciting that we were a part of it early on, and a part of the ministry with them, and cheering them on as well.
Right.
But maybe you could add to that list. There were some people that you were connected with that I know in theater and the arts that kind of went on and did some special things at other colleges and universities, and if not, that's okay. But
well, I mean, I know that the people that you mentioned, so I participated in a street ministry team. It was theater based, and we would go on the streets and do theater and pantomime on the streets. And every person that you just mentioned,
and we have some pictures of that, right?
We do.
We'll pull out those pictures right about now.
But all of them went with us. Sometimes 2 or 3 different times, in the streets of Orlando, down in Key West. We did a lot of relief efforts, because of course, when we were down at school, there were a couple of different hurricanes that came through in Florida. So, when we get involved in the relief efforts and things, our team would go not only down to help with, cleanup, but at the same time, we would go down and we would do children's programs. We would do programs in the churches to, try to bring hope and try to bring life into, a horrific situation.
Right.
So, those experiences, live with you because, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's not just going and being and getting your education, but it's, pouring yourself into the moments and connecting with where you are.
And a lot of it, wasn't just, even though it encompassed, witnessing to people and sharing the gospel with people, it also entailed nonprofit work where you're giving back to communities and you're
I mean, it was giving clothes, it was cleaning. I mean, we went to some of those places where, we were just shoveling mud out of homes, and it was providing lunch, it was providing, things to children. We had so many life-changing experiences when we were in school. And like you said, so many different people that we met that, the list just goes on and on and on. I couldn't even begin to think about all the different people, that, we quote unquote rubbed shoulders with. But, a great experience. Yeah. There's nothing that could replace it. If you go to college and your life isn't changed by it, whether you go to a Christian school or you go to quote unquote a secular university, you can find a group of people who are on fire for the Lord. You can get connected, and you can experience what it means to give back. And I think that's so important when you're in those years of where you're forming your biblical worldview, when you're forming your worldview, to get connected to the right kind of people.
Right.
Because it's so easy to get connected to the wrong kind. And I hesitate to say wrong, but I would say to get connected to the people who are more focused inward. It's important to get connected with people who are focused outside, looking at those who they can give back to. It's so easy to be so inwardly focused that we forget that there's people outside of ourselves.
Right. And it was such formative years, not only for you, but for me as well. And our two worlds, collided in a positive way.
Right. Well, our worlds connected because we were both in that situation where we were giving back. We were attending a church where we were both involved in the ministry within the church. We were going to church, but we both made that decision that while we're here attending a church, we're going to get involved. And so we both got involved with the children's program, and that's where, our friendship and, later dating relationship started.
And that's what has kept us together all these years.
Ministry.
When you toss in those formative college years that we were doing ministry together, and
it's over 30
nonprofit work. It's over 30 years that we've been together, and it's kept us together. And we're continuing to give back in the face of hardship and trials. And I know when you were in college, your family had hardship.
Sure. I think everybody's family goes through hardship.
Sure.
I guess I'm ripping the Band-Aid off here. So you're going to bring this up. So my father, when I was, I probably couldn't have been more than 8, maybe 10 years of age, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Is extremely young to be diagnosed with such a horrific disease. But by the time I was in college, he had gotten to the place where it was really debilitating at that time. And there were a lot of other outside situations happening. And unfortunately, got to the place where, my parents divorced. And you think that by the time you're in college, that stuff shouldn't affect you. But it does. It rocks your world.
Yeah.
And you came in on the scene in the middle of all of it.
Yeah.
Right when that was all going down. That's tough. That's tough when you get the news when you're at college and, you find out that your parents are going their separate ways.
And back then, early 90s, you were seeking out counseling and went down that path. And then there were some other professors that were, supposedly strong pillars of the faith that were detrimental.
Oh, yeah.
That did not encourage you. And they were not a good spiritual formative person in your life. And through all of that, I know I wasn't, free from hardship either.
Right.
My family had just moved to Pennsylvania from the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And there was hardship there with my family. And as we progressed, as we built our relationship and we dove into ministry, that became a grounding force for us as a couple. And it launched us into ministry and nonprofit work as well. And we went down this path of getting married in the mid 90s.
Very young.
And landing our first church in Pennsylvania, Windsor, Pennsylvania. One of the first rural areas in our time where they had a school shooting.
Right.
And that was a shocking thing. There was a school shooting right in Red Lion where I believe a principal was injured. And we were right in the hub of all of that, doing ministry there. And it was a pretty unique period of time of ministry in this small rural area. And, God used us there at that particular church. And we then went to Brunswick, Maryland. And during our ministry time at Brunswick, Maryland, I believe they started filming a movie in a small little town. You blink your eyes and you're through that town. The town was called Burkittsville. And the movie that they did there was the Blair Witch Project, which made a gazillion dollars, a gazillion amount of money on that particular short film. And then God moved us out of that church into Hagerstown, Maryland. That was a God thing for us. So there was hardship along the way after, that church in Hagerstown kind of imploded because the pastor's wife had an affair with a board member, and a board member's wife had an affair with another board member. It was a crazy period of time for us. We were living in a rented house next to the church, and that family had some financial issues, and another person purchased the house and, basically changed the locks. Fortunately, we were able to get most of our stuff out of there before they changed the locks, but we lost some of our possessions. And then we moved to West Virginia, and our first son was born at that youth ministry position there, right? So we faced lots of hardship in ministry and nonprofit. I think at that point in time, those hardships, all of them combined with your family struggles, the struggles that my family was experiencing through that time with a church split. And there was a lot of nastiness with that church split. Our hardship in ministry, financially, right? It was difficult. I think that what we were making in the church world back then in the mid 90s, all the way up to the, early 2000s, we were only making like anywhere between $150 to $250 a week. It was rough. Some places we had a parsonage, other places we had to scrape together the funds to find a rental property to live in. And that's rough. There was some hardship there. But then we made the jump after West Virginia when our firstborn son entered into this world in 2001. We made the jump to go to Springfield, Missouri.
Right.
And that was life-changing for us. Talk to me about the church ministry in your mind and then making the jump to Springfield, Missouri.
So you just covered
I covered a lot
whole bunch of information and jumped over a lot of things that I thought we were going to talk about. But so yeah, I mean, I think our church ministry years were very fulfilling, and God gave us incredible opportunities to speak into people's lives, and especially young people. And we had some wonderful opportunities to use some of my theater background and arts background, as far as working with the teenagers and young adults in those situations. Some of the, what was difficult, the difficulty was building relationships and then letting relationships go. I think that was a difficult piece for me. I had never experienced that. I know you grew up in the ministry and you kind of expected some of that. But I grew up in a ministry home. So I had lived in one area all my life, maintained friendships for all my life. So that process was very foreign to me. So that was hard. That was hard, was building relationships, giving my heart to people and then having to, leave. So that was difficult. So expected, but not understood, I guess is what I could say. I knew it was coming, but the actual experience was very difficult. But yeah, so then, when we were in, West Virginia, I remember, let me back it up a little bit even more. I remember you said to me, when we left Pennsylvania and moved to one of the churches in Maryland, I had a really hard time finding a job. Wanted to continue my work in working in television, and I had found this great post-production studio that I thought I was going to really move up quickly, and had real high hopes. And then all of a sudden they let me go, and I was like, "What am I going to do? I have no job." And I remember you saying to me, "I think you should substitute teach." And I was like, "That's the last thing I'm doing. That's it. I am not doing that. I am not doing that." And I remember you bargained with me. You said, "Well, do me a favor, take 2 weeks, look for a job, pound the pavement, see what you can find. But I want you to, in 2 weeks, if you don't find something, I want you to reconsider it." Well, I mean, obviously, there's history. History proves that I didn't find anything. And I said, "Okay, I promised you that I would consider substitute teaching." And then I found my niche. And so I started substitute teaching, and then, I substitute taught for, I don't know, 4 years? I don't know how long. I mean, as long as we were in that area.
Right.
And even when we switched churches, I just kept substitute teaching wherever we went. And then I had a principal pull me aside, and she said, "Why are you continuing to substitute teach? Why aren't you teaching?" I said, "Well, I don't have a degree in teaching." And she said, "Well, you can go to school to get that." And I'm like, "I already have a degree." Right. And you said to me, "You should go back to school."
Go.
And I said, "No, I don't want to do that." And you said, "You're going back to school." So that was quite the journey. But you're right. In 2001, you looked at me and you said, "It's time to go back to school." And I said, "Okay, we're going back to school, I guess."
Yeah.
So yeah, we not only did we decide to go back to school, but we both said we're selling everything and going back to school. So I remember, do you remember that day? We had this big yard sale.
We did.
And we had pretty much everything from our house was on the front lawn.
Yeah.
And we sold everything.
Right.
And we gave away our dog. We had a precious dog at that time, and we gave our dog away to a wonderful family. Just a wonderful family who kept in touch with us for a couple of years. Kept telling us how he was, what a great dog. Yeah. But anyways, so we just knew God had spoken to you and confirmed it with me that it was time.
My story was a little different than yours. I think you were going to school there Wilson.
Well, I was taking a couple of classes here and there because
was an equestrian school that offered.
They had a program for people who already had a degree who were going back for teaching. Mm-hmm. But let's back it up a little bit though. When I started looking into changing my program and going into teaching, I literally had to start from square one again. So I actually started, if you remember, at the community college,
right.
And I had to take like an art class, and I had to take these.
You were frustrated with all of that.
So frustrating.
I took all this stuff, and they wouldn't.
But they wouldn't count it because it had been so many years. And
so there was a window there. And so when we decided that God had called us to go back to school, and it was out in Springfield, Missouri, It was basically because of my education.
Yeah, but it was a great opportunity.
It was a great opportunity. Evangel opened up the door for me to enter into a degree completion program.
Right.
And it was the first cohort. I was part of the first cohort for this experiment in our Assembly of God schools. And so it was an 18-month program that I could get a business administration degree.
Right.
And God opened up the door for us to move.
Yeah.
And then as I was in the middle of that business administration degree, and we had Caleb.
Yes.
So we had two kids. We had Keith the third and Caleb out in Springfield.
Caleb showed up 9 months after we moved there.
Keith was born in West Virginia. Caleb was born in Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that program, I got an opportunity to get my master's degree in counseling at the seminary that was right next to Evangel University, and we couldn't pass that up either. And I was able to complete all of that in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
In about 4 years, I was able to complete both the undergraduate and the master's degree.
May have even been less than that, but
may have been less.
Because you went
nonstop. An opportunity
nonstop.
for you opened up, and I said, "It's your turn."
Yeah, and I said, "No, it's not."
With an infant and a toddler, and
I said, "No, it's not. I'm not. And you said, "Yeah, you are."
Yeah.
And it was crazy because you were 1 semester from finishing your master's degree, and I said, "Oh, Keith," I said, let me just wait another year. We'll move from Missouri. We'll get back to the East Coast. I'll just wait. You can't pass this up."
Yeah.
So I listened. I submitted myself because I thought, your husband has heard from the Lord all these years, every time, so you better listen.
Yeah. And so you went.
Here's the crazy thing. No, this is really crazy. It's not crazy because God's always directed everything we've done. But here's the crazy part. I went to Missouri State University. I said, my husband has told me about this program you're offering. It's called the TIP program. I can't remember. No, it wasn't called. Masters of Arts in Teaching program for people looking to finish their degree. Right. But it was a master's program, which I was like, oh, thank you, Lord, because I didn't want another special. Anyways, so I talked to the admissions program there, and they said, yeah, actually, you'll start in June. And this must have been May. Yeah. And she said, yeah, we can get you in right away. We'll get you started in June. And, a lot of our people actually start teaching in August. I just kind of laughed. I said, I'm not ready to teach yet. I just want to take some classes. And she said, oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. It's not a problem. So short, and let me shorten the story as much as possible. We're at the beginning of August. And now, in Missouri, school starts like the second week of August out there. They start very early and they end early. So, we've taken all of our summer classes. I think it's 2 or 3 classes, jam-packed of information on just like the pedagogy of teaching. And I took, and there was one class in math instruction, like the how-to of teaching, actual teaching of math. And so I had a great group of people I was working with, like classmates, and it was really great classes. So our instructor says, hey, there's this high school that has some positions open in math. And she said, I'd really like to talk to all my math teachers at the end of class today. So she talked to us and she says, hey, I'd really like for you guys to consider just putting in an application. She said, because here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you guys to just get some practice interviewing. I said, oh, that makes sense. Try practice getting an interview. So the school calls and says, hey, we'd like to interview you. I was like, oh, okay. So, and I'm thinking, I'm going to go practice interviewing, right? So I go for this interview, meet the principal, and I meet the department head. Both fantastic people. Justin Harrell and Diane Gettle. If you're watching, I love you. I miss you terribly. And so I go for this interview at 7:30 in the morning. And don't you know, they call me at like noon that day. And they're like, we want to offer you the position. I was like, wait, I just thought I was coming for a practice interview. I admitted it to them. They're like, no, we really want to hire you. I said, okay, well, that'd be wonderful. And now when would I start? And they say, oh, well, school starts in 3 days and we'd like you to come pick up your books. I was like, oh my word. And I did it.
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was just crazy. But I had the most wonderful support team there at the school. Yeah. And
it was an up and coming school.
And it was crazy.
They were starting basically at rock bottom.
They were.
And they were starting to build the school back up. I mean,
yeah.
Springfield was a big area. It was a different area because they had a whole bunch of schools. And if you lived on a certain side of town, or certain areas of the town, they had their own dedicated high school. Don't
quote me because I can't remember, but I want to say we had 8 high schools.
Yeah. It was pretty. It wasn't a huge city, but
it was big.
It was spread out to the point where they had to have that kind of a system with their schools. So it's really intriguing for all of our sports people that are out there. When you were going to Missouri State, the big name at the time was Ryan Howard,
right?
Who was a Philadelphia Phillies baseball player that came out of that area.
Yeah.
Now Missouri State's doing pretty decent with football, and they're still holding strong in some of those other sports as well. Well, you were at Hillcrest High School, I believe.
Go Hornets!
Yeah. A number of years after we left that area, there was an NFL athlete that came from that school as well. And he only had a short stint in the NFL, but he really put Hillcrest on the map there in that area. So it was a neat time educationally for us. It was also a spiritual formative time for us because we went to some churches,
wonderful churches
that were there, and we got to hear a lot of speakers. My journey, I was in the chapel office at Evangel University, worked there. I was the second administrative assistant for the campus pastor, and then I went on to Burrell Behavioral Health and rose up to a supervisor level, and got to meet a lot of different people. Politicians as well as business people, one of them being David Green, who owns Hobby Lobby, and really got to listen to him and speak to him one-on-one, and we met quite a few people. I think I like music and the arts just as much as you do, and we had the Coles come in, and their son was a part of a band, a pretty popular contemporary Christian band that sounded a lot like the Backstreet Boys, right? And they were +1, and their son came in and spoke at the chapel along with his parents. And so we really had some really deep, formative, spiritually formative, educationally formative years there in Springfield. And then my dad called and said that he was sick. And he didn't know how long he had. And so he said, would you consider moving back to Berwick, Pennsylvania? And we did. And again, we had another sale. We were living in a beautiful apartment in Springfield, Missouri, the Lakeshore apartments.
We sold everything but our beds.
Yeah. That apartment complex was set up like Inner Harbor, Baltimore kind of feel, because they were supposed to put a baseball field in, but you had a movie theater, you had restaurants, you had shopping, you had some other dining. You had this neighborhood set up where you had the apartments on one end for middle class. You had the very wealthy where you had some mansions where houses started at about, $500,000.
It was a full community.
And then you had a low income cost of living apartment complex that was really nice. It was not very nicely done, all set up in one hub. And we walked away from all of that to come back to Berwick, Pennsylvania, to help my father. It was a big step of faith for us
Right.
And God opened up the door for you. Talk to me
mm-hmm.
about how God opened up the door for you when it comes to teaching and education when we walked back to Berwick.
Yeah, well, it was the only job offer I got was to teach at Berwick High School. So that was just amazing. There's not, and in small towns, there's just not a lot of movement in jobs. But that very summer, there were 5 math jobs open. And so I was able to get a job here in Berwick and taught there for 7 years, I believe it was 7. Yeah, 7 years I taught at Berwick. And during my journey there, taught with amazing teachers. Loved my time there. But as often happens in my life, people start speaking into my life, and had a assistant principal there at the school who started saying to me, "You need to take some classes for administration." So I did. You have to take classes anyhow, no matter what you do. When you're teaching to maintain your certification, you have to take classes all the time. So you can either take them, through certain programs they offer, or you can take, college classes. So I thought, well, I might as well, just to keep my credits going. Mm-hmm. So, I took some classes in administration, and, wasn't sure if that was the route I wanted to go, but I thought, well, I might as well take the classes. So if that's a door that the Lord opens, then I can walk through it. So I finished the classes, did my internship at several different buildings. I worked in an elementary building. I worked in a middle school building, and I'd always taught at the high school level. So I felt like I had, a little bit of experience at each level. And, I started putting my applications out there because somebody kept encouraging me to do that. And kind of got to the place where...
And during that period of time, we made a big adjustment as a family because I left the nonprofit work that I was doing and started Harbor of Hope Counseling. This is about 12 years ago now. A little over 12 years ago.
We started the practice in 2011 on a part-time basis. And then we had the opportunity to purchase a home where we were able to convert the entire basement to your practice. And so that officially opened, 2013? Purchased the house in 2013, started converting it over. And in 2014, you became full-time, full-time running the practice from the house. And so I had been applying, and I finally got to the place where I was like, you know what, Lord, it's not for me. I'm going to stay in the classroom. That's what you've gifted me in. And I'm cool with that. I'm good. I'm staying where I am. And then there was a job that was available, and I was told about it, and I told you about it, and I said, but I'm not applying. I just want you to know I'm not applying. I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm done. I'm staying in the classroom. And, you said to me, just one more application, just one more application. And so, I got the job and worked in administration at that school district, for 3 years or 4 years. Must have been 4 years. Yeah. Loved it, learned so much. But it was a long drive, and I missed my family every day, constantly. Cause I was just driving so far. It took me an hour to get there, an hour home. And so then there was an opportunity to move to a school district closer. So,
and the superintendent, very wonderful man there, really helped guide you through that process.
He did. Yeah. Guide me through all of those steps. He was the principal that hired me in Berwick.
Yeah. I'm going to drop his name. J.J. Cleaver. Right?
Yeah. Shout out to the Cleavers. Love you guys.
Blaine Cleaver's father. Yeah. Really
wonderful man.
Providential.
Yeah.
And extremely helpful.
Oh yeah,
he's a gifted superintendent.
Yes, and he always was always willing to tell me where I needed to work harder, what I needed to improve on. But he was always very straightforward with me. Yeah. And I felt I was always looking out for the best for me. And there's not a lot of superintendents who do that.
Right.
So, helped me make a move over to Danville. And then God had a different plan. And
it was another hardship.
Yeah, it was.
You could see, all the movement all the hardships, financial hardships, sacrifices. You build up something, you strip it down, you move, you go down another path. But God led us all the way through. And this next path and part of your journey was an unexpected path.
Sure. So
very unexpected.
Yeah. June 19th. No, June. I don't remember. June 2019. I don't remember the date of it, actually, which is surprising because I've always had that date in my head. But June 2019, I had just a year prior to that had said to you, I really got to stop eating sugar because I feel like I'd had troubles with migraines, and I know we had talked about it, and I'd been to a headache specialist and they really couldn't figure out what the issue was. And I had read an article somewhere saying that, sugar couldn't be a trigger, and I had talked to you about it a little bit, and I had just started trying to, make some changes and trying to exercise a little bit more because I know you had expressed to me you felt I was not managing my stress very well. I had walked into a very, very difficult situation in my position as a principal that I just wasn't aware of. The school was wonderful, but there was just administrative situation that was going on. Didn't know about it until I got there. Very, very, very high stress. Nothing I had ever faced before.
They put it all on your lap.
Yeah. I mean, it was something that had happened before I got there. And I just unfortunately happened to be the one that ended up having to deal with it.
Yeah. They didn't disclose it in the interviews.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I mean, there's no hard feelings, but it's just that's just where I was. And you had already expressed beforehand that you were concerned about my stress level. So anyways, I had started trying to use an elliptical. I had tried to start, doing some things.
Got some equipment.
Yeah. And, that night I had used the elliptical. Had come back upstairs. I still was feeling very uptight. And I said to you, I'm going to lay down. I'm just going to try to watch some news just to try to get myself to calm down. And, I don't know if I had dozed off a little bit. I probably did. I don't remember, but I remember calling to you and saying, "Hey, Keith, I think something's wrong. I can't really feel the left side of my body. Something's weird."
Right.
And then you came in and I said, "Actually, you know what? I think I'm just really tired. I think I just need to just go to sleep." And you said
no.
Absolutely not.
That's
know
right.
what's going on.
I immediately took you to the hospital.
Yeah.
Which probably wasn't the smartest thing either, but I had to get you there pretty quick.
Well, yeah. I mean, no,
so
that was
the hospital was, about 5-10 minutes away.
Right.
And so I got you there and you got treatment for a
stroke. Yeah. Never thought, and here's the weird thing. My older brother, 2 years prior to that had a stroke.
Major stroke.
Yeah. Major stroke he had. Totally taken aback. And I thought, what is going on? Like this, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on. Went through tons of tests to try to figure out why it happened, what started, couldn't go to work for a while. We were trying
to work through all the details of all of that, trying to figure out what the next steps were. You thought you could go back to work, but then medical professionals were kind of telling you a different story that you better slow down, maybe rework your job hours.
Well, right. So the doctor, our primary care doctor, she was fantastic through all of this. And she was great because I think she knew I was so driven. I was very professionally driven. And that's not a bad thing to be, driven professionally. But it is when it causes you not to pay attention to your personal health and mental health. And when it causes you to disregard the people around you.
Right.
Because, you were trying to tell me in your most loving way without upsetting me, you had been trying to tell me that you were noticing things, and that you had concerns about myself and how I was managing the job. I think you were trying to speak into that, and I wasn't hearing it. And the doctors were trying to speak. After all this happened, they were trying to speak into that. And all I kept saying was, school's going to be starting. I've got to be back there. What are you talking about? I've got to get back to work. I've got to get back to work. That was the only thing I was thinking about, was I've got to get back to work. So the doctor finally said, well, I'll let you go back for half days. I'll let you go back for half days, but that's it. I'm not releasing you for a full day of work. I'm not doing it. So I, agreed to that. I was like, well, at least let me go back for half days. So I went back for half days. But I would get there, and I wasn't allowed to go early in the morning. I could do like 3 hours in the middle of the day. I couldn't go there at the beginning of the day, and I couldn't stay to the end of the day. I could go for half of the day in the middle. And so, so then I felt like I felt like I was like worthless when I got to work, because I wasn't there really to do much of anything. And school started, the year started. I wasn't there for the welcome. I felt like I was just, but anyways, So in the meantime, we're there trying to figure out what's going on. You said, "Phooey on this, we're going to Johns Hopkins. We're going to figure out what's really going on." Thankfully, we had an insurance that would pay for a second opinion. And we were getting right up close to the time to go to Johns Hopkins. It was like the September 23rd, I think. I was supposed to be there. And I think it was like September 12th or something like that. And I pulled up to the school. Now, when I was getting ready to leave for school that morning, I knew I had a headache coming on. And I ignored it because I'm stubborn like that. And by the time I got to the school, I knew I had a stroke coming on. Yeah. So I got myself into the school and into the nurse's office. And I told her, I said, "I think I've got a stroke coming on." And she checked my vitals and she said, "Yep, we're taking you to the hospital." So I had a second stroke.
Yeah.
And
you went to Danville, Geisinger. The school called me, and I rearranged my counseling schedule and jumped in the vehicle and went there to be with you. And
yeah,
they're at Geisinger, Danville. They thought it could have been. They really didn't know, and that's what really sent us on the journey of getting connected with John Hopkins.
So John Hopkins said, "We know what's going on." I walked in the door. He said, "I know exactly what's going on." He said, "Your migraines are intensifying, and they're so intense." He said, they are giving you strokes. Mm-hmm. And he said, "And if you don't take care of your body, and you don't change your habits, and you don't change your behaviors, and you don't control your stress," he said, "you are going to end up with a major stroke."
And you stayed on that journey to this day.
Well, when somebody looks you in the face and says, "If you don't change your habits, you don't change the way you eat, and you don't manage your stress, you're going to have a major stroke, or you're going to kill yourself," that's like a wake-up call. Yeah. It's like, you better listen to me, and you better do exactly what I say. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, you change, I changed right in that moment. Right. And he's, he said, "Listen to me." He said, "I'm going to tell you, here's the 3 main triggers for migraines." He says, "And you've got to get these out of your diet." He said, "Stop eating gluten, stop eating dairy, and stop eating sugar." He said, "I'll tell you, you get those 3 things out of your diet." He said, "You will reduce your migraines." Mm-hmm. He said, "But you've got to exercise." Mm-hmm. And he says, "And you have got to reduce your stress." Mm-hmm. Well. And
that took us on a journey where you decided to retire.
Well, there was no way, because when the stress level as the lead principal of a middle school building, and particularly the one I was in. Right. I mean, there was my body just couldn't handle the stress. My body couldn't do it. Right. My body was breaking down from the stress. So after lots of prayer and lots of conversation, we made the decision I would retire early. And, I then, through therapy, and it took a long time for me to get to where I am today. Right. It didn't happen overnight.
You took a regular retirement. You didn't take a disability retirement.
Right, because I wanted to leave the door open, because if someday I wanted to go back. Yeah.
The school printed in newspaper articles that you retired because of your stroke. And that really,
I think they said because of medical issues.
Because of medical issues, that you had a stroke there on campus. And, but you took the regular retirement, not the disability retirement.
Right.
And when you got your first check for your regular retirement, COVID hit.
Yes, and I was so thankful I was not there through all that mess.
It would have been another layer of stress.
Yeah, I couldn't have done that.
And that was extremely difficult. And so we talked about getting you on board, and we talked about a lot of different things, but we got you on board with Harbor of Hope. You were running our office. I made some changes where I gave you majority ownership. And we then went down the path of talking about starting a nonprofit. And we started this nonprofit because we knew you had giftings, not only in the arts, not only in math, not only in administration, but also in grant writing.
Well, I had experience because of my administration. And, but, don't forget the other piece. It was just like a God thing too, was that, Liberty University Online Academy, which our boys graduated from, I had applied to there, at least three different times. And then all of them, all of a sudden, right. All of a sudden, not really, but, April of 2020, they out of the blue call me and say, hey, we have a math position open and we'd love to interview you.
And you got hired.
Right.
And it didn't affect your retirement.
No. So I teach for them. I teach at their online school.
And God's hand has been on you every step of the way, raising two wonderful boys. And our eldest is at Liberty University. Our youngest is at Geneva College.
Yeah.
Liberty's in Virginia. Geneva is out towards the Pittsburgh area.
Right.
It's been an incredible journey, and I know
it has.
The final piece hasn't been written yet, but
no.
What drives you? What motivates you here moving forward?
That is a loaded question.
It is.
But what wakes me up in the morning? I think that, there's so many different answers I could give. But what is the one thing that makes me wake up in the morning? I think the one thing that makes me wake up and want to start the day is I know that God has a purpose. And I don't, every day is different, but I have found that even in the darkest of times, when I look back, hindsight's always 20/20, of course. But when you look back in those really dark times, you have to choose. It's a choice to believe. Because in the dark times, it's hard to believe in the dark times. But when you choose to believe that God's promises are true, that's where your faith comes in. It's easy to say, I believe, when everything's going great. And I think in the dark times, when you say, I'm going to choose to believe, even though I don't feel it, even though I don't see it, even though I don't understand it, because I'm telling you, I didn't believe it. I didn't feel it. I didn't see it after my strokes and when I had to give up that professional career, which I thought was God's plan for my life. But it wasn't. That wasn't really what he had planned for me ultimately. And I just had to blindly say, okay, this, God knew this was going to happen. He, allowed it. I think he allowed it because I had known God was speaking to me for about 1.5 years before that happened about leaving. And I was not wanting to. So I felt like the Lord kind of allowed that to happen because I was being pretty stubborn. I felt like God was speaking to me and I was not listening. I was like, I'm not giving this up. Are you crazy? You're asking me to give this up? So I think that's just my personal opinion. That's just me talking. I mean, I just feel like, so in those dark times, you just choose. You choose to believe. Like if you really have a faith, if you say you have a faith, then in the dark times, you choose to trust the faith. Because if we give up on it in the hard times, then, you wonder, well, then why have a faith?
Right. In all those hardships, it could have been detrimental in our marriage and in our family.
Well, let me
didn't allow it to divide us.
Well, you can't. Because when you on that day, when you take that vow, you say, hey, it's for better or for worse. Now, we've had some worse.
Rich or for poor.
Right. And we've had some really better. And I think you choose to, in those times, you try to recall the good. Mm-hmm. You try to recall, well, do you remember this or remember that? Remember when God did this or remember when we experienced that? And so those are the things that you try to focus on, but yeah, but what gets me up in the morning? I know that, God's got a plan. Mm-hmm. It's not always my plan. Right. It's definitely not my plan. But
and now you're overseeing this nonprofit. We're doing some really wonderful work with mental health,
trying
and going down this path where we're going to be hopefully expanding mental health in our region. We'll see where some of these grants go, but God is really using you in some powerful ways. And so in Women's History Month here, we're recognizing not only Jeni, but all women who have had hardships, have had ups and downs, have had difficulties, whether it be spiritually, relationally, financially, physically. We know that hope is there, and hope can get you through. Hope is invaluable. And with God on your side, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. And that's the hope that we share. That's the hope that Jeni has. And that's the hope that we want to offer to you. Thank you for watching the Speak Hope Now podcast. I hope this blesses you, and I hope this helps you, and I hope this is used to see you through every circumstance, every difficulty that we might be facing moving forward. But I hope that it draws you closer to the Lord, the one who created faith and created hope, that he can draw you close to him so that he can walk you through all of life's difficulties. Remember, it's his footsteps in the sand.